morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have Melanie Franklin with us. Is one of our favorite speakers, and she speaks about neuroscience. And I always look forward to her presentations because she does a lot of research, and I always learn a lot of things. So looking forward what Melanie has in store for us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. This is going to be a fast and furious tour, everybody, of neuroscience. So 59 minutes of everything we can talk about. My credibility for this certainly is I've just finished publishing the Neuroscience for Change at Work book. Prior to that, I'd written a couple of editions of the Agile Change Management Handbook. And actually, the Neuroscience book was my 10th book. I'm also the chief examiner for the Neuroscience for Change course, which is a 2-day course I'll show you at the end, along with the Agile Change Agent and Coach qualifications as well. I've put my email at the top of this slide simply because it's been a bit of a miscommunication about when this webinar was happening. So I must leave at the very end very promptly. And so on that basis, if you want to follow up with me at any time, I love my subject and I'm very happy to take your questions. So if you don't get a chance to have your questions answered, then just email me. Very happy to do that. I'd like to get to know you a little bit. So please use the chat function. What I'm going to say is this, put 1 in the chat for yes. Yeah. So first question I want to ask everybody is, anybody here who's involved as a change manager, taking responsibility for change management in their organization, in any way involved in change? So if you can just put into the chat, it's easy for me to sort of see. I can just scroll through then. It's a technique I learned from my colleagues in the US, and it seems to work very well if you don't want to do a formal poll. Okay, so the majority, somebody's a 212. Somebody's answering all 3 questions. Oh, I see. They're trying to get ahead of the curve. Okay, well, I'm just looking at question 1. Okay, so there we go. Majority of you are in change. Okay. Do you have a qualification in change? Now let's start all over again with questions. So let's see what that's coming in. Okay. All right. Okay. That's more sort of half and half, I think. And lastly, let's have a look about neuroscience. Is this a completely new topic to you? Just gives me a sense of who I'm pitching this is. No? Okay, good. There seems to be, yeah, okay, fine. There's a general awareness across the board. That'll be fun to start with then. Okay, well, thank you for that. It's good to have your participation. It's good to try to get to understand you. Just so I can tailor my remarks, really, more than anything. Let me start with telling you my urges to write about neuroscience and to bring neuroscience into change. One of the many things that I've done over the years, I work for lots of clients, but I was chairing the Change Management Institute in the UK for 6 years. And I am now chair the Change Capability Community, which is a very active community on LinkedIn. And we have monthly networking events, virtual. So people get into breakout rooms and they start debating things that are of interest. And I think it's really, really hit home for me that over the last few years, we have some serious issues in change. And I think that neuroscience offers us perhaps a new way of addressing them. So I'm going to start with my background of where this originates. I'm then going to take you through how useful it can be. So my plan, first of all, is I think we have a resource gap in change. Really simple little picture here, but I think often what we find is that in any organization, there is a sort of fairly static number of change experts. I was talking to my training group today about in December, I had a whole lot of heads of change management in the room from private, public, and third sector, who all talked about the fact that they have a team of 2, 3, or 4 people. The average number came out at 4. And that is to try to service all of the change happening in the organizations around them. What's interesting is that we are seeing a huge increase in the volume of change. So the problem is that there's a static number of change professionals, an increasing volume of change, and therefore the business experts, the ones that we really need to engage because they are most impacted by change, that we need to build relationships with, are being spread ever thinner. So what's available to us becomes a much smaller pool because there is so much happening. I'm impressed that any of you managed to turn up today on this call, but I'm very aware that there's 34 participants and over 150 of you registered. So many of you will be listening to this via a recording because you simply cannot fit it in to your working week. And certainly in all of the events that I run, we are continuing to see that trend. Personal development has become a discretionary effort that is last on the list. So congratulations to all of you managed to get here, and congratulations to those of you taking the time to listen to the recording. But your time is spread so thin, and that is what's happening in the business. So we definitely have a resource gap. I have the data to back this up because every year I run the Global Change Capability Survey, and it's coming up again. I'll give you the link in just a moment for you to be able to take part. But when we look at the statistics, less than half of people know that change is coming because we're just not engaging. We just can't get our message out there in a very crowded marketplace. So neuroscience and being brain smart is clearly going to be the thing that's really important for us to be able to do, because we're just not laying the groundwork for change. The numbers get even lower when we ask, have people got the time to adopt new ways of working? Change takes repetition. Change is about building a new norm, which is a new habit. And that doesn't happen the first time you do something. We have to keep practicing it until it starts to feel, oh, I didn't see that the first time I did that. Oh, I wasn't aware of that. Oh, I never saw that on the screen the first time. And so we want that repetition. We want that time for people to build up and acquire that, first of all, that knowledge, and then that ability. Oh, people don't have the time to adopt new ways of working. So we're going to have to work smarter. Again, our level of change feels manageable. No, it doesn't. People don't feel that they can cope. And that, I think, increasingly is something that really worries me, that we have an awful lot of people who, at the end of the day, have done an awful lot. They leave work, they close down their laptop lid, feeling, I didn't make much of a dent in my to-do list today. I didn't get much done. And then they start the next day feeling like they're already behind. It's not really a sustainable way to run any kind of organization. And we develop change management skills in our people. Well, one of the things we're going to be talking about here is, are we building a wider capability for change across our organization? Are we helping people to actually take part in change and make less of a reliance on that small number of change management experts? This problem has been building up for a number of years, but I'm going to quote some statistics at you now. I regularly review the change surveys around the world, particularly CEO surveys of what's happening, because they are often, if they're not instigating the change, they are authorizing the volume of change in their organizations. IBM have done a recent survey. These are only a few months old, the quotes that I'm making here. 43% of CEOs they've surveyed have said they will increase the tempo, the pace of their organization's transformations in 2024. That's compared to 19% who think it might slow down. So 2/5, or more than 2/5, are going to increase the tempo. But here, these are statistics from last October saying we're not coping now, and yet they're going to increase the pace. I've often quoted this one because I from last December, which I think is really interesting, because in 2016, Gartner accidentally asked a survey question, which was about the level of enterprise-wide change that an ordinary employee, not a change expert or a project manager or a business analyst, is actually involved in, being impacted by. And the average was 2 sort of organization-wide or enterprise-wide sort of transformations. But when they posed that question again last year in December, the answer was 10 enterprise-wide initiatives. So that's a 5-fold increase in the volume of change. So multiple changes hitting all of the time. At the change capability community, we talk a lot about simultaneous high volumes of change because it's hitting people all of the time. Any of us involved in AI implementations at the moment, and that seems to be coming thick and fast in my experience. Interesting that IBM in their survey found that 35% of CEOs believed that their workforce are going to need some kind of retraining and reskilling over the next 3 years. So that's a third of the CEOs, and that's up from 6%. That's a massive jump. PwC, similar question, again, CEOs across Europe, they found 2/3 of CEOs think that their workforce will need to be upskilled. Why this caught my attention, not just because AI is the key trend at the moment, it's because when we talk about upskilling, retraining, we are talking about a seismic behavior change for individuals and all of the fear and anxiety that goes with that. About I'm not good enough, I don't have the right skills, will I still have a job? How hard will it be to learn all of these new things? So those just give you a flavor of the volume of change isn't going to get any less anytime soon. Why is this important? If you want to take part in the survey and have your say this year, please register. It's going to be opening up in just a few days. So we would love to have you on board. We keep it open for about 4 weeks. And what we've done this year is we've recrafted it, same questions, different ways of answering them, so that we've shortened it to just be a few minutes. We're taking the feedback that everybody's got, which is how many of us have got time for this. I had a LinkedIn request the other day from somebody who says, oh, I'm writing a PhD paper on this. I wonder if you'll be available for a 1-hour interview. And I'm thinking, I have not got the time to go and get a sandwich, let alone a 1-hour interview on top of everything else. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's making these trade-offs and going, well, that's 1 hour of my life that is in addition to my heavy workload that I can't spend with my own family. Why would I do it? So we've cut it down to the 5 minutes. So have your say. I do this survey every year, and the analysis and report writing that it takes is horrendous. But I do it for all of us because I know how many of you quote these statistics back at senior leaders when you're trying to argue for recognition that change management is valuable and that it's necessary and that it helps. It also gives you a very useful benchmark to say we're doing very well, if you want to tell a positive story to your senior leaders, or you're arguing for more resource, perhaps. So do take part, because I think it's really important that we have that evidence-driven, data-driven argument. We're very good in change at telling stories. We also need to supplement that with more data. So the high volume of change, the call on the same old resources all the time led me to sort of thoughts over the last few years, which is a concern about the current models of change that we teach. Whether it's the Kubler-Ross transition curve, grief curve as it's sometimes known, or Kotter's 8 steps, whether or not we like Bridges' transition model or the ADKAR method. They're all very good. I think they're brilliant at setting out a journey planner of what might happen on any particular change. But I do think that they come with a bit of a health warning. They've all been developed, they've all been written on the basis that we're taking a group of stakeholders through an individual change and that we can help guide them through that change step after step. But I seriously question if that is the truth anymore. And therefore, from a where do I go next? This is how I got to the answer, which is neuroscience. Because this is a dreadfully old diagram of mine, but it's something I draw for executives all of the time, which is you're going through multiple transitions. all of the time, left, right, and center, one after the other. And I'm saying to my senior leaders, one of the key things we have to be able to say to people is, where are you? Catch them up. Baseline where they're up to. This is what we've done so far. These are all the changes coming up. This is what we've done so far. This is what we still have to do. So, in other words, having models that talk about almost an individual transition curve and not recognize that actually there is change after change after change layered onto people's expectations concerns me. And the problem about this layering model is that I might have some people who are, I'm just trying to make aware of certain changes, whilst at the same time, I'm trying to get messages out there about the importance of participating, practicing, reassuring people as they're learning new ways of working, building the resilience in others because they've been going for some time and they're just trying to come out the other side. So I've got all of these mixed messages, and it's incredibly difficult for me to get the right content of message, because although I think on one change, I'm just making people aware, they're bringing their experience of all the other things that are happening to them. And I might be dealing with a huge amount of resistance that comes from all the other things they're in the middle of doing. So what has really helped me in dealing with this new world of multiple simultaneous change, high volumes of change, is to think about how the brain is reacting. Very simply, we talk about this idea of threat. In the red there, that there is a huge amount of fear of the extra work, anger at what we're losing. We might be losing our experience or the skills. We might be losing our status in a group because we used to be the expert in Excel and now we don't use that anymore. We feel threatened by the uncertainty. We feel threatened by feeling less valued, less important, being excluded from our old teams as we're being shifted into new teams. So for all of these things, it really causes us a great deal of anxiety. And it's very hard to say, well, you shouldn't be feeling anxious because we're just starting this change and here are all the benefits, when actually that anxiety level is being created by the multiple changes taking place. I've put a smaller group of positives, rewards, if you like, excitements. There's excitement about opportunities and pleasure from improvements and an acceptance that change is normal. That's all great. But the brain is more wired to think about threat. And therefore, what has really helped me is actually taking this on board and thinking, do you know what? What you need to do, Melanie, is it doesn't matter what change initiative your stakeholders are currently being affected by. You need to think with every message that you communicate, how can I reduce the threat and how can I move people more towards opportunity? And therefore, understanding how the brain reacts to information is making me a lot smarter about how I engage with my stakeholders. So let's just do a little taster of how that really works. So we've got threat to reward. Somewhere in there is a sort of, we get to peak performance, then we move into resilience, being able to cope with change, being creative, and well-being. So I clearly want to move people much more towards that right-hand side and away from the left-hand side. What's happening with all those threat responses? It's really helpful to appreciate what happens to us as individuals. This never bores me because it reminds me of how people might experience the things that I'm saying or asking them to do. We've talked about change being a generator of threat and anxiety and stress and fear. The joke in my household is my husband thinks it's hysterically funny that I absolutely loathe change. We've just refitted our kitchen and we've got exactly the same oven and microwave as we had before, because I said to him, my brain is too full to learn how a new oven and microwave work. I didn't have the same impact on the dishwasher. And since it went in, I have not learnt it. It's giving me huge amounts of anxiety. I really struggle with something as basic as that because it's another change and I just can't cope. So what happens every time I walk past the dishwasher, stupid though it sounds, is that actually I get a little bit of adrenaline. I get a little bit of ooh, that almost, if you're in an orchestra, it's like the big drum going behind you. And I start to focus in on that whole thing of, oh, the dishwasher's not loaded. I haven't done anything with the household chores. I'm really falling behind. And it's really focusing in on that stupid issue. And of course, cortisol, which regulates our response to stress, almost like turns the tap on and just lets stress flood through my body. What's interesting when we're really stressed, it happened to me this morning when I saw that something had not been done and the deadline is 48 hours away. Something's been missed, and all I could focus on was that thing and getting it fixed. And my brain, this hypervigilance, I think, is one of the most interesting things about when people are stressed, is that actually what it does is it closes out my brain's ability to take in more information. I can't take in other sources of information, so I cannot take in a wider context. And if you like, put it into context and go, actually, Mel, nobody's died. It's not the end of the world. I can't do that because all my brain is doing is, you could miss the deadline. You need to get these forms signed. You need to get this scanned and back to the people. You could miss the deadline. You're going to miss the deadline. This is going to be a disaster. And that's what your brain is doing, is hammering home all those negative messages. And all you're focusing in on is that thing. So it closes out the opportunity to celebrate other achievements. You can't even think of other achievements right now. So you can't take in ideas and support from other people because all your brain is going is you failed, you're wrong, you've got to get this fixed. I find this really interesting in terms of there's a physical impact of this hypervigilance as well. The physical impact is that on any given day, pretty much we're good at peripheral vision. So if you think about your peripheral vision is nearly 180 degrees. So put your fingers out towards your ears and you'll get to a point where you keep your eyes straight forward and they'll get to a point where you can't see it. And you go, no, I can see it. What's interesting is that actually, even when you are stressed, actually your peripheral vision gets less. It's actually quite dangerous physically. Anybody who knows me knows that I've been run over several times. I'm not great at spatial awareness at the best of times. What I find I have to do that really is since I learned all this neuroscience, it's affected my life in all sorts of ways. But one of them is when I finish a stressful day, or if I'm about to get up from my desk and sort of fly across the office because something's really bad and got to be dealt with, I take a deep breath and I let it out. I give my brain a moment to sort of reset the noradrenaline and the adrenaline. I just decrease the stress level a little bit because by doing that, I just widen my peripheral vision. I'm less likely to trip over, stub my toe on the side of the desk, bang my head on a glass door I didn't know was closed. All those things that happen when you're really stressed. You make more mistakes. You really struggle when you're very stressed. That is absolutely the polar opposite of what we want when we're trying to lead people through change. What I want when I lead people through change is creativity, the widest possible context, their ability to co-design with other people and collaborate with other people. It's the polar opposite of this hypervigilance and this stress. So what can I do in the way in which I put messages across where I focus on creating pleasure, creating that sense of it's going to be fine, it's not that big a change, here are all the things we've achieved so far. Every time I put a positive message out there, the brain, when it picks that up, it gets that sort of dopamine hit. The brain chemical called dopamine creates a sense of energy, achievement. Yes, good. It's a positive energy that motivates. It gives us that we can continue. We also get endorphins. We often talk about these as the happy chemicals, but actually what they do is they're very good at suppressing pain. They make us able to take on more, do more. And also, can I highlight how other similar people are experiencing the change? That you're part of a wider community, connect you with other stakeholders, encourage relationship building, collaboration, co-working. All of that creates that lovely positive chemical, bonding and trust. Our ancient brains really like oxytocin because what it's doing is saying, you're not alone, you're part of a bigger group. If you stumble and fall, somebody will help pick you up. It goes back to the idea that when we were hunting for food in a more Neanderthal way, I want to sleep, somebody else is guarding me, they're still awake. If I go out hunting for food and fail, somebody else would have been successful. So our brains prioritize very strongly that sense of being part of a wider community. So all of these good chemicals have amazing impacts on the brain. It's the opposite of hypervigilance because I can take in more information. So as I take in more information, I can process it, compare it, connect the dots, and have insight. I can have new ideas, which is exactly what we want in change. So when I think about dealing with a world of multiple simultaneous change, I am very interested in what neuroscience can teach me about how I do this. There's nothing wrong with some of the models we use about identifying and analyzing our stakeholders, because I think that that can help us think about some of the content of our messages. But there is the danger that it just sort of bounces off in a very busy world, you know, based on, I'm going to give you this information because based on your level of impact or your level of influence and power. The problem is it can bounce off. What I'm trying to do is make sure that understanding some of the brain chemicals, understanding how the brain reacts to the change information we give it, I go further than logical arguments, which I can make a rational argument to you. But actually, if you're feeling threatened, your brain cannot process all that information and it bounces right off. Storytelling is very compelling, and you are more likely to retain the information than if I just gave you facts and figures and I can tailor the story to your situation. But again, in a world of high volume change where you're getting lots of those messages, did you have a chance to listen to my story? Did you read that email where there was that compelling story? If not, it's going to bounce right off. What I can use neuroscience to do really is to actually create almost a visceral experience where you take notice of what it is I've said. Your brain can't help but process it in a positive way because I'm going to meet your needs. The things that push you towards the reward response and seeing change as a positive pleasure and opportunity and benefit is because I'm going to give the brain what it really needs. It needs a sense of being valued and respected. So our status, our respect goes up. I can connect you with other people. Those connections and oxytocin enables you to process more information. I can give you certainty and predictability. I can give you autonomy by giving you choice, a menu of all sorts of different things you can choose to get involved with to make the change a reality. As soon as I give you that choice, it's a visceral experience by the brain that says, that's good. I'm in charge of my own destiny. I can manage this. Therefore, I'm going to give it my support. So I think there's a lot in here that happens to the brain where we can deliberately create the positivity that the brain is looking for. Any questions so far? Am I making sense? You might want to put a 1 in the chat if you think, yes, she's making sense, or 2, I'm not. So put anything you can in the chat just to give me a sense. Oh, thumbs up and floating on the screen. That really helps me. You are creating dopamine for me. You are creating energy at the end of, what was this, 14 and a half hours of my work so far. Yeah. So yes, yes, yes. I love this. Totally resonating. So the comments are helping. So what I'm getting now is a sense of dopamine, that sense of achievement, which is giving me energy and motivation. You're making comments, you're putting thumbs up, which means I feel connected to you, my colleagues, my community on this call. And you're giving me pleasure. The heart symbol that just floated up on the screen there. You're giving me pleasure, which means I'm feeling that, oh, yeah, this is great. The endorphins. It's pushing down the pain of I have to carry on with my work straight after this tonight. So just thinking about this already connecting you to what you naturally do. It's seeing what you do and seeing how you craft messages and what you choose to do in light of what does that do for the brain. Personally, that has been my massive learning point over the last few years. Because when you think, does this create pleasure? Does this reduce pain? Does this open people up to be able to accept more information, to have more ideas and insights, to be less defensive? I mean, the quickest way to reduce resistance to change is to maximize on the pleasure side of the brain. So I'm really helping myself achieve the change, but I'm also creating that very positive experience for people that makes them want to do even more change, which in a world of high volume change becomes very important. In these sort of briefings, we don't have much time to do things, but I still like to give practical examples of what I'm talking about. So I'm now going to do a few practical examples of what I'm talking about, and then give you a route by which you can maximize more practical ability. So I'm going to sort of almost get into trainer mode here. So one of the key things that the brain likes is certainty. So we respond well to certainty. We respond well to making sure that our messages are relevant to us, that what we are hearing is aligned to our roles, our responsibilities, that in other words, that we're being sort of respected and valued for what we do and who we are. So thinking about how you craft your messages to meet that need for relevance, to meet that need for certainty, that keeping messages very focused, very short, means that the brain has to process less information. Let's talk about why this is. It sounds awfully critical of me to say the brain is lazy, but the brain is a high functioning part of the body. It takes in a huge amount of energy. It uses about 20% of our oxygen. So with every breath, 1/5 of that is going towards the brain. Our brain may be only about 3% of our body weight, but wow, does the brain really take the energy? So a bit like any sort of high definition television, if you are ever binge watching Netflix, for example, after about 3 hours, your television will flash up a message saying, are you still watching? Do you want me to go into standby mode? I hate those messages because it just makes me feel very lazy on a Saturday afternoon. It makes me think I should be doing something else. But the television is trying to put itself into standby mode to save energy. Our brains do exactly the same thing. Our brains are looking for shortcuts. Our brains are looking to process information in the least way possible. One of the reasons that I have put so much in terms of visuals on these slides is because I know that the brain takes a lot less energy and can process a lot quicker when I put a visual in front of you than if I'm asking you to just listen to me. Listening to me is the highest processing power of all. So it's really important that we think about how we craft our messages. Use visuals whenever you can. Use short messages. Use simple words. The harder something is for the brain to process, interestingly, the less it likes it. So if you want to stoke up resistance to change, why don't you create some complicated version of your message? Put in as many long words and as much terminology as you possibly can. give a presentation, give a speech, avoid the visuals completely. And you will stoke the fires of resistance because the brains are going, well, that's hard to understand. I do not get what you're talking about. Not only does the brain, by the way, think it's hard to understand, but the brain then deprioritizes it. If they can't be bothered to explain it simply, it can't be that important. So we don't like it and we think, oh, it can't be that important. I've shared this with my own accountant because he wants to retire because of my inability to fill in any forms. And I've tried to share with him that I find the tax forms very difficult, and therefore my brain is trying to avoid them, and it's deprioritizing them. Because it's thinking, well, it can't be that important because they're so hard. If it was really worthwhile, somebody would have simplified this. Apparently, that's not how HMRC works. But anyway, you can be better than that. So let's say you've got 9 benefits associated with the change. Carefully selecting what it is you do, carefully curating your messages, carefully picking your messages means that you think, actually, senior business leaders, there are benefits 3 and 5 are very strategic. Those are the ones we really need to communicate with. Those who actually have to change their ways of working and are directly impacted by the change actually benefit number 8, which is about simplifying how they do things and shortening how long it takes them. That's what we want to highlight for them. You can signpost to other information, but don't clutter things up. So this is a massive argument for decluttering and keeping things simple, because the brain just wants to deal with simple information. That decluttering, that simplifying, using simpler language. In very practical terms, I do this a lot now. I first of all challenge people to go, can you draw me a diagram of that? I was looking at a bullet point list just before I came on to this call, and thinking, good grief, they've mentioned 4 things. And as they've listed them and described them, it's clear there's a relationship between these 4 things. There's 3 things you do in parallel, and they all fit into this bottom thing, which is the overall sort of conclusion. Better if we draw a diagram. 3 boxes, 3 arrows, all pointing into the bottom box. Yeah, now that is going to simplify the message. It's giving people a visual. It's showing the relationship without them having to read the words and process that information. So I constantly look at the papers I get sent and think, how can I turn this into a diagram? How can I share this as a visual that will make more sense? The other thing that I do is I think about reading age. I work a lot with those who are neurodiverse. I work with somebody who is incredibly clever, but he was far too clever for school. He was easily distracted. He was always on to the next idea, the next thing. And therefore, actually, his reading and writing ability are poor. They are not that great. And yet he's phenomenally intelligent. One of the things that I constantly do is I think about how can I cut the volume of words. Again, visuals are helpful, but I also constantly put things into ChatGPT now and ask ChatGPT to write something in the reading ability of a 10-year-old. It cuts out big words, it simplifies things, and it gives the brain what it really wants. I get a far more positive response. So if anybody ever accuses you of dumbing down, do not take it as a criticism. Thank them for the compliment. They'll be confused, by the way, but thank them and then explain what I've just explained to you about how you are much more likely to get noticed. You are much more likely to get your message accepted and understood if you do these things. So simplification of the message, always what you're looking for. Here's something else. Certainty, predictability is incredibly important to the brain. The thing is, if our brains think, right, this happens, then this, it's sailing along quite happily, there's a flow to what's happening, then our brains can kind of go onto autopilot. We sometimes talk about this as unconscious competence. You can talk about it as being a habit, a routine. But as soon as we have that, the unconscious competence means that our brains don't have to put a lot of processing power into it. Effectively, when we know how to do something, when it's predictable, it's certain, we know what the next steps are, then our brains can really cut the processing power required. It's a massive neural pathway. The neurons are fired up so many times between them that actually that pathway is no longer a pathway. It's a motorway with lots of sort of carriageways, and it has lots of safety barriers and lighting, and you can zip along there at 150 miles an hour. So that's, again, what our brain wants is certainty. It does not like surprises, because surprises tell it a couple of things. Number one, what? That's unexpected. That's shocking. That's not what I was expecting to see happening. So there is that loss of confidence because we were sort of sailing along, doing things the way we've always done. Oh, that's different. And the second thing is it throws into the brain, oh, I'm going to have to take a decision now. I wasn't expecting to do that. So should I do it at all? So let's have a think here. We seek certainty, we form expectations, and our brains automatically predict what happens next. I'm looking outside at the dark sky and all the rain that's falling outside my window right now. And I've got a glass door to let me out of my office when I finish this. And my brain is already thinking about, I'm going to close down the laptop lid. I'm going to grab my phone because I have to run somewhere else. I'm going to slide the door and step out and slide it back again. So my brain already has that pattern. I did that in an office, must be about a year ago now. And this shows you what the brain goes through. As I went up to the door, it happened to be a push down handle. I pushed it down and pulled the door towards me. And it was locked. It was about 8 o'clock at night. There was nobody else in the building. My brain, though, I felt it. It's that visceral response. The hairs on the back of my neck went up and I started to feel very hot. It's because my brain is shooting me very significant adrenaline-based messages. Threat, threat, threat. This is not what was expected. This is not supposed to happen. This is a dangerous situation. So now I'm back to noradrenaline. I'm back to hypervigilance. I think I told you my name at that point. All I could have told you is the door is locked and it shouldn't have been. That's what we're trying to avoid. We want to keep the certainty going. So when we think about clear outcomes, a logical flow of next steps, rationality about why we have to do each step, then the brain goes, okay, I'll just keep going. Yeah. What does this mean? One of the techniques I use with my clients is a recognition of there are people who have been bedding down change in your organization. Think back to the beginning of the year. 9 months ago, there were lots of things happening that have now perhaps become the new norms. So they adopted new systems, they restructured their teams. There's other changes taking place right now. They're starting to use new data. They've got new customers or new services or products that their brains are really trying to get the hang of. And here you are coming along with another change. If you want people to listen to your change, you need to say that it adds to or makes use of what's already happened. So anybody who's ever tried to pull together a portfolio of all the change initiatives in the organization, it's a reminder of how incredibly valuable that contextual information is, because you put it into here and you link your new change, the next step you want people to take, to what's already happening, so that people feel valued. Hey, we're adding to what you've already done because what you've already done is so great and it was such an important foundation step. Thank you so much. So again, you're getting that dopamine hit, feeling respected and valued. Your effort was worthwhile. So you're getting all those positive brain chemicals. Similarly, you're saying we're making use of what you've done. So we're thanking you. You've helped us. Great. If you're really good, by the way, you can also talk about how what you are now asking for is the precursor to what's coming next. So that people think, oh, it really does flow. This is fantastic. We should do this. So I talk about this being an aligned or cohesive picture, but we're giving the brain what it really needs. Okay. Final one that I thought I'd share. I've got, well, on the Agile Change Coach course, I go through 41 techniques in 2 days. And there are lots of techniques that you'll love and really resonate. And some will resonate more than others, depending on your own context. But it's almost like a rapid toolkit of being brain smart. So I've only been able to pick a few out. So let's talk here about the time to reflect. Understanding neuroscience has completely changed my understanding of how I do things. I'm able to put this diagram up in front of my senior leaders particularly, and talk about, hey, you've got a certain time frame, and we've divided it up into sort of iterations or increments if you're working in a more agile way. There's an outcome, those stars represent an outcome for every one of those. That's great. Okay. But I tell them, and this is what they love, I want to squeeze the most value out of every one of those iterations, every one of those outcomes. So let's actually redraw the plan. Now, I've put very large pieces of reflection in here, but the point being that I say to them, let's put some reflective time in. Because in doing this, what we do is we can get people to talk about their previous achievements. It's all going to be very positive, by the way, because when we talk about achievements, problems that we solved, positive reactions that we got, success stories, positive data that's showing that people are participating or adopting the change. As we share all of those mini successes, they can all be tiny, but they all come together as a bigger picture. Two things happen. Number one, we create a very positive energy to go forward, and that can increase the pace for the next iteration. But more importantly, if we can do this collaboratively, we do it with each other. You say all the things that you are proud of and that you succeeded at. I say all the things that I'm proud of that I succeeded at. As we share that information, you listen to me, I listen to you. We're taking in new sources of information and we're connecting the dots and we're having moments of insight. And as a result, we will come up with new ideas. What happens in these reflection points is that as you talk, as I talk, we start to sort of gather a bit of new knowledge, and we've created a new sort of ability. We start to think, well, how might we apply this? What difference will it make? Who will benefit? And as we talk through how can we apply this, we start to acquire even more knowledge. So we start to think about how we can apply it, what difference it makes, who will benefit. As we talk about the difference that new idea makes, we again create more knowledge. We think about the difference and how we can apply it and who will benefit, and so on, and so on, and so on. So as we talk, we inspire each other, we have more ideas. And therefore, we're squeezing out the value. We've made some changes, but wow, there are so many more that we can learn from and inspire each other. So it really has changed, absolutely changed how I set out my plans now and how I argue for time with my senior leaders. And what they really respond to positively is, we're getting more value for money. If we just put a bit of reflection time in, I'm going, yes, I promise you, you will get more accurate changes because people will listen to each other and they will really build on the good things and you will do more positive things. So think about how we build that picture and keep learning from each other, really importantly. Now, I'm coming to the end, so if you want to put any additional questions in the chat, please do so. I run training courses because I want to build your capability. I'm at the point in my career, to be honest, where I do this for fun. My job is to make sure that you succeed at work. I'm really proud of the neuroscience course because I think it gives you it builds on a lot of what I've just been saying about how the brain works. So if you're the type of person that likes to know how things work, join me. Yeah. A couple of days and you get a qualification at the end of it, which is why I've put the digital badge up. But you will have that baseline of knowledge. And I think, as somebody said it to me the other day, we're sprinkling scientific knowledge onto what we do in change. And she said it's having an impact on my senior leaders. I can see I'm getting a lot more respect for what I say. If you're in the middle of changing jobs, if you're just starting a new change, if you're struggling with, oh, I've got to get more people involved, join me instead, both, for the Agile Change Coach course, coaching you through 41 techniques, all driven by neuroscience, all practical about how the brain works. And I'll take you through 41 techniques across the whole of a change life cycle, because the thing we need to do is use our brain smart knowledge to actually make a difference. And I've done a lot of the lifting. I've got about a couple of hundred in my back pocket, and I usually add more than the 41 in the course, but not to make sure you get value for money. But the thing is, it's about how anybody, whatever your role, you yourself, you have to be able to lead yourself through change. So this brain smart understanding, yeah, is really important. It's really important that you are able to encourage others and build their morale and their sense of, I can cope. We might call it well-being, we might call it resilience. But all of these techniques are about how you help others see things. And I think I've got a question in here about somebody who's a staff well-being champion, and they're looking for sort of guidance on supporting staff through constant change. And I would say that the most important set of techniques I've ever built all come from building resilience and ways in which we can help people find the positives in even the most negative situations. So resilience is going to be the key word. I'm going to answer that question. And it's going to be techniques that help people reflect on what they've achieved. That sense of achievement builds dopamine. Dopamine is a chemical that gives you the energy and the motivation to keep going. So they are both, that supports people through that constant change that never seems to end, because we keep the energy levels high. People ask me, how are you so energetic about what you're doing? It's because I use a lot of understanding of the brain. The brain wants to hear good news all the time. Good news makes it happy. Those happy chemicals, the dopamine's more addictive than heroin. The brain loves it. You get a hit of dopamine every time somebody puts a like on. Every time you put your thumbs up, when I asked, how am I doing? I got that hit of dopamine, which totally energized me for the last half of this webinar. So if you want to look after the well-being of other people, thank you. I love the hearts and the claps. It's working. It really does. That's what you want to be doing. So how do you facilitate conversations with your teams about how far they've got, how many opportunities for achievement they've had? And the other thing I would strongly suggest when it comes to well-being is breaking the change down into tiny pieces, because the small steps mean that we have faster achievements, but also a smaller ask of somebody is easier to explain. So the brain takes a lot less energy to process that message. It understands it more quickly. Therefore, it can get supportive of it more quickly. So what we're trying to do here is find ways. I do an awful lot of planning techniques, which are about how do you break things down. Decomposition is core to agile change. It's how do I take a change and actually break it into the simplest possible steps? How can I help people find how to connect those steps so they create their own flow? They've built their own sort of journey planner of little things they have to do. And I keep the time frames very short for them. Let's just talk about today. I'll jump on a call for 5 minutes with you and we'll do the same tomorrow morning. That's the kind of well-being that I think is helpful. Small steps, so that people don't feel overwhelmed by the ask on them. But also, when you have small steps, you can increase the likelihood of success because it doesn't require as much effort. But it's also making sure that you're giving them that opportunity to feel the achievement, feel proud, feel positive. So there's a virtuous circle in here around. There's a very close link on the Agile Change Coach course. I talk a lot about the link between the positive psychology world and the neuroscience, because actually what the brain wants, the brain smart answer to anything, is to always look for the positives. Yeah. Simon's raised a hand. I don't know if I can hear you, but otherwise put it in the chat. I'm just coming to the end. I don't know what's happened there. But I will say this: if you're on the call and you've bothered to invest either live or listening to the recording, I've given you a 20% discount. Go to those links and just put the BCS 20 in, and you will get 20% discount, because I am in the business of rewarding effort. Again, brain smart. Just by seeing that discount code and being told you get it because you turned up, you invested in your own career, your personal development, you feel better. So just whether you not you do it, it's the fact that, and this is my closing message, talk about the good things that you're going to help people with, talk about the support package, talk about the reassurance you're going to give them, the training you're making available to them, the opportunities for practicing the change. As you talk about them, you create that positive environment, and then they get a second hit of the positive chemicals when you actually provide the support. So those are the things that I want you to take away. And I finish with just about 2 minutes to go. So I will put something else reassuring in front of you, which is people love the courses. So I'm now building oxytocin, because you're reading that people felt the course really stretched them and helped them think about change in a different way. The content was insightful. The pace was excellent. Gave me so many new ideas. I love learning about the brain chemistry. This is applicable for so many people in my network. You are reading comments from other people. I am building your oxytocin. I am building your sense that you are part of a profession for change management and you're part of a wider community. So just illustrating that once you are brain smart, you think about it for everything that you do. And even crafting this short presentation today, I'm trying to use brain smart messages to make sure I engage with you as much as possible. So thank you very much. If you need to get hold of me, Melanie at agilechangemanagement.co.uk, or you can find me in LinkedIn when I was having a great hair day. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much. That has been brilliant as always. My oxytocin is up the roof. I'm feeling it. That was fantastic. I've been taking notes. That was great. I can see also the comments in here from the webinar. Thank you so much, as always.
Been a pleasure. Have a very good evening.